One.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Oh, what an audacious start there, Les. Welcome back into another edition of the Kickabout here on the Blue Room. I'm your host, Rob Vera, joined by Les Roberts. As always, this is a show about Everton and music and whatever else we feel like talking about at any given time. Les, happy international break. It's a little weird because normally we always, by tradition, just sort of follow hey, international break, and then we insert some joke about not having to watch Everton this weekend, but doesn't really feel quite like that anymore. It's almost like the cynicism isn't. I wouldn't say the cynicism is gone, but it does feel like the cynicism is on a bit of a vacation after 9 unbeaten. How about you?
Yeah, it's dissipating the cynicism, isn't it? So the last time we missed the weekend, I think it was FA Cup weekend, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I was really sort of missing them then. I think this weekend I'm still kind of glad of the break.
Yeah.
I think we've sort of fallen into a little bit of a rut now whereby I think this team's probably peaked, done as much as it can. I mean, I still think we'll beat Arsenal at home. I still think we've got some good games coming up.
Maybe, yeah.
I think we just need to sit back, take a little breather, take stock of things, and then, go back at it on Wednesday, the 2nd of April against Big Red, which is what that's still like 10 days off, 12 days off, miles away. So
we're only 2 matches in March, so
crazy.
The benefits of not having a cup competition to worry about or any Europe to worry about is you get a little space in the fixture list right now. But I mean, I sometimes look at schedules like these, like we play two matches in March, and I'm like, how can they not space out the rest of the schedule? This, when we've got this kind of opportunity in March to not have much going on. But I don't know, Les. I can only do so many pods on the absurdity of the number of international breaks and the overscheduling of all these players. But whatever, we're in.
I think it's that stupid Nations League thing, isn't it? This weekend.
Oh, is that happening? Is that happening? Is that still a thing people talk about and care about?
Is anyone interested in it? It's like a friendly tournament for international teams. No one cares.
It's just look. Everything is branding, Les. It's just repackaging friendlies and calling it something else. But I guarantee you, maybe I shouldn't guarantee because maybe it depends on who wins it. Like if San Marino won it or something like that, then yeah, sure. They're going to have a parade or something. But let's be real, like who won the Nations League last time, Les? Is that a thing that anyone remembers and or was celebrated?
It's a good question. Who are the holders? Current champions, Spain.
Okay, yeah.
So the most successful teams are France, Portugal, and Spain. 1 title each.
Well,
it's been going for 7 years.
God, well, that sounds pretty much like I don't know. I mean, if you told me that those were the teams that won the last few Euros, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I get it.
Amazingly, it's got finals, promotion, and relegation.
Wow. Relegated. Can you imagine? Like, I almost would be like, I welcome relegation of, my players, national teams so that maybe, does that mean they're going to get called up less or whatever? I don't know. But
you're no longer a country. You're a state. I don't know. Strange. Really odd.
You're no longer a country, or you get maybe, Les, whoever gets relegated from Nations League gets annexed by the United States as the new 51st state. I don't know if you've heard, but we're shopping for countries to annex. I didn't know if you knew
it's up for grabs, isn't it? I mean, if without going too political, you could say the UK is already there.
Yeah. Well,
I think
maybe. I don't know. I think the UK. It's sad because as bad as you think things are in the UK, I feel like I would trade places. I would absolutely trade places politically just because of how terrible it is here.
I mean, I think we're both pretty terrible in different kind of ways.
Just in different ways.
Me, though, I won't go too much on this though.
Yeah.
So Britain sort of sets itself up as like a nuclear state. It's it's got a nuclear deterrent. We can't actually use our nukes unless America says you can use them. That's literally the situation. We can't use them unless we get the nod. So we are like that scrappy little brother who everyone hates.
Yeah. Well, if it makes you feel any better, like I don't know, outside of the movie War Games, I don't know if you ever saw that Matthew Broderick movie from the 80s.
Matthew Broderick, yeah.
I mean, you got to simplify it by having only two sides. And, if you start incorporating other countries with nukes, it just becomes a more complicated game for that Atari interface that it had. But
this is true.
I don't know. Whatever. I am here. Me. If there is anything that is Rob Vera pilled, it is optimism, not cynicism. Let me be negative. I refuse to give into that. We're gonna focus on the happy today. Well, so let's do the Everton bit first. Okay, so getting back to kind of where we're at, I agree with you generally, and I would understand people kind of generally holding the sentiment that we've maybe kind of plateaued, and it's all just kind of sputtering might be the right word, but I think that it's all feeling kind of shoulder shruggy, and it's still kind of this elongated sense of relief for me. I mean, I think this is that period that when Moyes was appointed, we were begging for and hoping for, which was a last few months of not having to care too much. Now, I will grant you that there is apparently some bizarro scenario where 11 English sides could theoretically qualify for Europe, and it would be very Everton that if we missed out, like we didn't finish 10th or 11th and we missed out, like that would be very Everton, of course. But I maintain, I was talking about this with Matt previously, but even if we could, we're not really I don't want to be in Europe next season. Is that a weird thing to say? Like, we're not ready as a squad. We got too many things to do. We gotta go buy the groceries before we can cook the meal, if you know what I'm saying. And I feel like otherwise it's being in Europe next season for this group with all the work that has to be done and decisions that have to be made would be very. I don't know. It would be very much like suddenly finding out that there are 50 people headed to your place for a party and you haven't bought any booze yet. It feels like a big burden at that point.
It would be like the worst anxiety dream ever, wouldn't it? It would be exactly like that. Yeah, I think I usually am always of the opinion that if you can qualify for Europe, it's a good thing, and you can get into Europe and you have that European football. Everyone loves it. It's great, but I think on this occasion, I agree with you. I think this will be a terrible time for Everton to qualify for Europe, just because, like you say, we've got, I think, 13 players potentially leaving the squad in the summer. I mean, obviously, we can't get rid of everyone at once and get a load of new players in. That would be, because that's just got the potential for chaos and catastrophe. But I think, I just don't think it will be a good time for this club to do anything but be in the Premier League and concentrate on getting that right next season. Again, for maybe for another mid-table, mediocre season. I think we finished in real terms 11th last season, I'm going to say. This season, we can't finish any higher than 12th at a push.
Oh, well, then it all takes care of itself then.
So I just think if we just sort of build on last season, you can't go far wrong then. I think that's all we need. Just slow incremental games, get our house in order, and sort of get ready for better things. I think that's the aim these next couple of seasons. Yeah.
Well, luckily for us, as you kind of alluded to before, there's nothing really about our form that suggests we were going to be storming up the table in some kind of Cinderella scenario to begin with. It's a very dicey 9 game unbeaten string right now with lots of maybe not enough scoreless draws, but a lot of 1-1s, a lot of that mixed in, and I keep trying to, like, the other day when I watched the game, I was, I can always tell how I'm feeling about Everton based on, generally speaking, the basic geometry of my body while I'm watching. Am I kind of like this? Am I going to lay down? Whatever. Am I like this towards the screen? Am Am I, I can sort of tell how I'm feeling. And I am relieved to be at a place where I'm not getting too worked up about these games right now. What I'm wanting to see, frankly, is just it's more on the micro level than the macro level. I don't have an expectation that this is going to look that similar next season. Like we're gonna have a lot of these players will be back, but a lot of them won't. We'll have added people. Hopefully, an off-season break, you're gonna have some players that come back better, and whatever. Like a lot of that's gonna happen. And so when I'm watching these games, I'm really I find myself sort of focusing on individual players and just generally speaking, allowing myself to just sort of enjoy the moment of that particular game. And, while you're in it, like when we, last time out, it certainly felt like one of those situations where, against West Ham where, and I think people had varying opinions on this. I felt like we played pretty well in the first half. Didn't play great. I would even say there was a lot of people that were like, man, we were awesome in the first half. And I was like, yeah, but we were also like 2 incredible saves from Pickford from being down 2-0 or 2-1, Yeah. So whatever. And then in the second half, we were second best for the vast majority of the second half. But like I said about Everton many times, and I would say this about West Ham in this game, when you only score 1 goal, anything can happen, and anything did happen in the form of yet another Jake O'Brien goal. And I'll be damned if we didn't almost win. Like Alcaraz, I think may finish 7 times out of 10, and you just. I just my head was in my hands, but my disappointment was confined more to that moment than it was like normally in a season like this, or in a season where we're really worried about the points, whether it's because we're doing well or because we're at the bottom of the table. Those kind of results linger, but I don't really know anyone think about how that Alcaraz miss would have resonated with all of us if we were in a fight for our lives right now. Yeah. Or, and you'd be hearing people saying all kinds of crazy shit about how get rid of this guy, insert some kind of xenophobic South American comment that I've heard a million times. Like, luckily there was none of that. I think everyone sort of recognizes that, hey, this is where we're at. And hey, if we win that game, nice, smash and grab, we get 3 points, whatever. But it doesn't really matter right now. And I don't mean that it doesn't matter at all, but it doesn't matter in the big existential way that results have had to matter for us over the last few seasons. And so from that standpoint, would have liked the win, would have liked us to play better, but I think the players are. I think you may have even said it, Les. Maybe they're in flip flops. I don't know if this is total flip flop, because I do feel like we are at times seeing them push it at certain times and playing overall well, and they're still 9 games unbeaten, so it can't be that bad, right?
Yeah, I mean it's one of them, isn't it? You can look at it both ways. It's 9 games unbeaten, but maybe 4 without a win, or 1 win in 6, or something like that. But I think the difference for me, and you can compare that run to a run under Dyche, but his would probably be peppered with a couple of defeats, but loads of draws, which, as I've said in the past, is enough to keep you in this league. Basically, if you draw those games that you might otherwise get beaten, they're the points to keep you up generally. But for me, the main difference is we're still in the game at 1-0 now. So, like you said, West Ham only scored 1 goal, could have had 3, but for 2 great saves from Pickford. Yeah. But we're still in that game, and there's a palpable feeling in the ground now that there's not that defeatist attitude when we go 1-0 down. Because it seems for years it's been the fact if we go 1 down, that's it, we're done. We ain't scoring 2. We're probably not even scoring 1. So you're kind of thinking, yeah, it's going to be a defeat, this. But right up until the end, like you say, we didn't play particularly well in the second half, but it always felt that as long as the ball was in play, we had a chance to score. Yeah. And right at the end, I think Ed mentioned on post-match, I don't know if he mentioned it on the post-match or around the post-match while we were talking before we were recording, but that goal against West Ham was exactly the same as Beto's against Fulham.
Yeah.
Exactly the same, but with 3 different players involved. Yeah. Crazy. absolutely mad. But I think the thing I like about it at the minute is there is still that slight optimism about everything. No one's feeling down about it. We can watch these games, like you said, which I thought was an interesting point. You can kind of watch the game in isolation because there doesn't need to be a wider context because we're not going anywhere. That game on Saturday, West Ham can't go any further. We can't go any further. It was classic on the beach football. But that said, it wasn't a bad game.
No.
And in the scheme of things, that's not a bad result for us against West Ham, which sounds really jarring. But they've won 5 and 10 at Goodison. Yeah. They win at Goodison a lot now, which is
they've got some real quality in that squad too. Yeah. I mean, I every time I see Jared Bowen, I wish he was playing for us. I mean, he always seems to play well against us. I would say the same thing, by the way, about Souček, who it was so. Speaking of Everton, it was so funny seeing the random speculation news reports. I don't even know if they're actual, real, legitimate reports or links, but you're going to get a lot of West Ham players being linked to Everton this summer because of Moyes, but. There was quite a bit of I did notice quite a bit of nose turn uppedness, if you will, or eye rolling at the idea of Souček, which sort of look. I tend to want to target your resources on younger players, whatever. Tomáš Souček is 30 years old. He's not ancient. And every time I've seen him over the years, and I'm not saying he is exactly what he was, 2 years ago or, a season ago or whatever, but Souček's always looked like a pretty good player to me. And I do think it requires a slight this weird cognitive dissonance where you've got some people saying we should absolutely keep Decore for some reason for a little longer, but yet Souček would be too old or is a bad idea. And I don't really understand that because I would take Souček over Decore. I mean, not that they're exactly the same, but I'd do that swap any day of the week. I don't know about you, but I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing we got to think of now is, Idrissa Gueye has had a brilliant season.
Yeah,
he's been exceptional, but next season he's going to be 36,
and
he may, he's a player who may keep going at the top level till he's 40 because he doesn't look out of place in the Premier League on the top of his game at the minute. But there will come a time where he needs replacing, and we need to start that now. We need to be looking at players so we're not relying on him to play 35 games a season if he can't do it. So we need to be making that transition now. Someone like Souček, he could split that position between them. They could both cover that position. And it's a strange thing, isn't it, with Everton? We always do this. We turn our noses up. I think Matt Fluskell was talking about he wanted Chris Wood years ago. Before
I used to make fun of Chris Wood, and boy, he has put me in my place this season, hasn't he? What a renaissance at Forest.
Exactly. So it's sort of like we just need to let the managers manage whoever's picking the players. Yeah. Just let them do it. Not turn our nose up at anyone. Not be snooty about anyone. I remember when we signed Kevin Campbell, and I don't think I was alone in this, but a lot of people were quite underwhelmed. A lot of people I knew anyway, because he was at that point he'd been become a little bit of a journeyman. He'd been to Arsenal and Forest, did okay. Went to Turkey, and then I think back then, if you went to Turkey or anywhere in Europe, you kind of dropped off the radar a little bit. And it was quite an underwhelming signing, but he was brilliant. He turned into exactly what the team and the club needed at that point. So, we should learn lessons from that. If the crap after 3 games, then give him hell. But
here's the thing. I think there's a middle ground. Like as someone who is like Les, I haven't said this to anyone, and I guess I'll take this opportunity to admit it to you, but I do miss transfer Rob. I want you to know that. For those of you who've been listening to the Blue Room for years and years, there was a time where there was no greater joy for me as a Blue Room podcaster and an Everton fan than the unique magic of the transfer window, especially in the summer. I didn't mind losing sleep. I didn't mind going down weird rabbit holes of media reporting to try and suss out what was real, what was not, and really just I love the game. And over the last few years, it's felt I've become completely detached from it, because when you have no money to spend and you have no real aspirations, like, it's just sort of, who cares? And even when we were kind of limited on money, but we knew we'd still sign some players, you were at least interested, because it was the promise of the possible or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think this summer I'm going to get back into really enjoying and really kind of digesting a lot of the links, because I do feel like, to your point, like I don't think that we have to become rubber stamps for every decision. Like, we can't just say Moyes has been great, so whoever he signs, I'm just gonna go with it or whatever. I mean, we're allowed to criticize, we're allowed to analyze. Yeah. I mean, I'm fine with that. But I will say that we probably have to be cognizant of not being too I use this word a lot with Dyche when it comes to his system, being dogmatic about, well, it's only this way. And I think player recruitment's the same. Like, yes, the typical player we'd like to be signing is on the relatively younger side, upward trajectory, resellable asset, all the normal check boxes, right? But I do think that there is value to bringing in players that have recently played well under David Moyes, who understand how he wants to play, who have produced in the Premier League. If you can get them on terms that are, that make sense for the club. And look, I'm not saying we're going to be gigantic spenders, but we certainly should have a budget for some upward mobility at this point. And so I look at a Souček, and I even look at I would even argue that I think some people would look at an older player like Gay, to your point, in the context of having new ownership, and say, well, now that we have money and a budget, that's the kind of player we can move on from now. And I think where I'm almost going to zag in that and say, it's because we have more resources and therefore potentially, hopefully, a little more room, margin for error, if you will, that I think that then you not only should re-sign Idrissa Gueye, but now you have the ability, to your point, Les, of saying, how can I extract the most value out of this asset at that age, right? So yeah. I think we both agree, and I think everyone would agree, that it's not realistic to expect Idrissa Gueye to play this many games and maintain this level. That is, once you're at age 36 and beyond, let's be real, that's very hope as a plan. But if you sign, multiple guys who can play a position at a pretty good level, who you don't have to burn either end of that candle too much, and you're able to kind of platoon them, and injuries are going to come up organically, and you're going to have opportunities where sometimes they have to play a little more, play a little less, whatever. I think that could be a good thing. I think that could be a really nice thing. I want to sign, Charlie Alcaraz, to a permanent deal this summer. He's going to be 22. He's young. He's on an upward mobile trajectory. I think we clearly need to figure out what we're doing at the striker position. We need to figure out, I think the entire defense, outside of maybe two or three guys, is really up for discussion, especially at the fullback positions. I think there's a conversation to be had about Tarkowski, but again, I think that this new ownership, the money that we'll have to spend, if spent right, can not only bring in new value, but can maximize the value we currently have on our books today with someone like Idrissa Gueye, who once again, excellent, got the assist for the game tying goal. Has just been a pleasure to watch this season. And I'll be real, I did not expect this sort of Renaissance type season from Gueye. It's been great to watch, and he's probably the player of the season.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think he's hit 100 plus tackles, hasn't he? Again, this season, I think he's the first player in Europe to do it this season so far. It's about the 7th time in his career he's done it. It's just like, he's just been incredible. And, we often talk about, he should never go back and never re-sign players, but he's been one who's probably been a massive, massive hit, and we've relied on him so much since he's come back. But as you say, he's not going to keep this form up for so long. Just on recruitment, it's great to have those sort of 22, 23-year-old players coming into the prime, but you've got to have a good spread of ages as well as positions as well to get a balanced squad. So if we are looking at someone like Souček, he's 30-year-old, Czech international, played at West Ham, played in the Premier League for a good few years now. He's probably the sort of player, if we could get, he's a good profile to sort of fit in with the likes of Charlie Alcaraz or any players around that mid-20s age that we can get. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the summer of transfer, Rob.
I'm ready for him to be back. I've missed him.
I'm looking forward to that.
I'm ready to be bored enough again to go down transfer rabbit holes and talk about it a lot. But
I just think in general we need to be just go with whatever happens this summer. Just be quite optimistic about it, because it's the first one in a long time where it's going to be a proper summer of transfers.
Because this is the benefit of the doubt summer, Les. This is where we can maybe give a little benefit of the doubt. It's the first summer. Let's give them a chance to show what they've got and see what they do before we just instantly react, crazily to everything.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't even know what the actual setup is. Is it a transfer committee, or is Moyes he's not getting free rein, is he? Is it?
No, well, I gave up a long time ago, Les, in terms of trying to suss out how Everton makes decisions. Now, I will tell you that with this completely, we now have a new owner, and we have a new structure, and I imagine we'll have some explanation, but it does sound more like a kind of like a triumvirate type system where, I think it's going to be a little bit of CEO. It's going to be a little bit of the manager. It's going to be a little bit of director of recruitment type. I don't think won't be a director of football, which again, don't think that the model of director of football is necessarily bad or flawed. It just was not something that was ever deployed properly under a completely incompetent ownership, right? I think it could still work here, but I'm also completely open to the idea that you can be successful in terms of your recruitment efforts in a variety of models. It's all about people being on the same page. I don't really like the idea of Moyes having carte blanche over everything, because I don't. Yeah. But at the same time, and I keep returning to this idea, I feel like David Moyes is the type of manager for whom the types of players he signs are not so system specific that they couldn't translate to other systems when he eventually leaves. I know it's one example, but you look at Roberto Martinez and that magical first season he had playing with Moyes' players for the most part. And that was a completely different system and setup and approach and all of that. I think that since Moyes is I think Moyes is one of those managers who has he has concepts and he has maybe some preferred formations overall, but he's looking more for certain traits of players, and then he is just saying, okay, we will only play one way, and that's this way, and we never deviate from that. So from that standpoint, I'm not too worried about it yet, but ultimately the proof is in the pudding, right? We got to see how this all shakes out, and really, frankly, we're not going to know how this is going to look until the season starts, and we're not going to know, what that kind of greater, is this thing greater than the sum of its parts or whatever. Les, I want to talk really quickly before we move on from West Ham. Speaking of, as excited as we get about recruitment, I am frankly excited about some of the young talent that we have in the squad that is starting to just slowly but surely get an uptick in role and minutes. And obviously some of it is guys who are coming back because they've been injured for a long stretch this season. I'm thinking of, obviously Shermiti and Timur Abunam. Then there are guys like Jake O'Brien who, apparently just didn't have the, they lacked the necessary Premier League experience to play. There was no way Dyche could have played it. I don't know how Moyes even was able to play Jake O'Brien. I don't know how he made it work, but he's made it work. But really quickly, two guys I want to talk about really fast. First, again, a cameo, but and some of this perception or impression of him stretches back to last season as well. But man, I'll be damned, Les, if every time Yusuf Shamidi gets on the pitch and makes an appearance, if he doesn't kind of impress me and get me a little excited about the potential of what's there. One, I want your thoughts on Shamidi just generally as what you've noticed about him and what you like about him. But two, and maybe this is the $1 million question, where does he fit into next season in regards to our strike force? I ask because I feel at times that there is this weird glass ceiling, if you will, of, well, a young striker can't be a starter until he has more experience, but he can't get more experience until he started more it just becomes like, how do you get this guy in games? To me, I look at the striking position at Everton right now, and we'll talk about players who are outgoing later, but man, I think it's wide open. I think right now, and we may be buying a striker this summer, but to me, if you told me right now, look, we're gonna go into next season, and we're going to, before we just jump into spending big money on a striker, we're gonna go in with Beto, and we're gonna go in with Shamidi, and we're gonna go in even with Armando Broja, and just say, hey, you guys are pretty young and pretty talented, and we want to see if someone can take this job and win it. Like, am I crazy for that, or is no? We have to sign no offense to Chris Wood, who we love, but we have to go sign a 30-year-old striker who's been doing this forever, who will eventually be disappointed. Like, I just don't know. I want to find a pathway for these young players.
Yeah, it's a real balancing act, isn't it? Because you could go out. If you can go out and you can get a 15 goal a season striker, you go and get them. Sure. Regardless, you go and do that. But they're quite hard to come by.
Yeah.
Or you will have to throw a lot of money at the problem. And
or do we have one of those guys who just needs an opportunity, I guess is my question.
Yeah. But then if you do go out and get an experienced player, you're then pushing someone like Shamiti down the pecking order.
Right.
Because there is the perception that, Beto will probably be the senior striker out the two. Although you think if you give Shamiti Beto's run of games, would he, because it's taken Beto a long time to sort of hit that scoring streak. Yeah. He's gone cool off. He's cooled off again now. Sure. So we don't know if it was just a blip or he has got, proper quality and he can maintain that form. So if you do buy a striker to sort of go in ahead of Shamiti, that pushes him down the pecking order. I think ideally, given his lack of game time that he's been getting and the pressure that could be put on him if he was sort of first or second choice striker, I think a loan next season would be ideal. In much the same way Branthwaite went to PSV.
Okay.
And came back a better player. I think that sort of loan has to be the right one, obviously, at a quality club who's going to give him game time.
How old is Shamiti now? Is he 21?
I think he's early 20s, isn't he? So
yeah. No, that's not a terrible idea. I'm not against that. It feels like defenders can go out on loan and then we bring them back and then they can play. I wonder if a similar path exists. I guess it depends on how the loan spell goes, but Shamiti, there's something there. I feel like there's something there.
Yeah, definitely. He's got the attributes to be like a really, really, really good striker, and we just hope that he's not one of these players that constantly gets injured because he's not had much of a run at any sort of level of football while he's been at Everton. So I think ideally loan him out, but then you've got the problem. We've got to get someone in to cover him. Or if he does get a good run of games at the end of the season, that could set him up to go into next season. It was noticeable that when we did sort of throw all the strikers on at the end of the game against West Ham, that triple substitution really lifted the bar with the players. I think that last 10 minutes we were pretty good, as good as we played all game, really.
Hey, David Moyes triple sub. I almost fell out of my chair at that point, by the way. And none of them were a center half. I think y'all talked about
But so if he could get a run of games, because given the fact the position we're in, we could start him ahead of Beto now. If he's fit, There's no reason not to. Start him
I
ahead
just
of
want to
Calvert-Lewin,
see.
certainly.
It's nothing against Beto, by the way, who
No.
I think overall has clearly acquitted himself quite well since Moyes took over. And there can be no doubt that not only did he score goals, but scored important goals for us.
Yeah.
The reason we're sitting here talking in these flip-flop terms is because we won those early games in Moyes' early days here, and we're in it. We're now in this position that I always come back to this, Les, and this is just a development or team building thing that I can't get out of my head. But you get these rare windows in a relegation style sport like football. You get these rare windows where you don't have the pressure to really go upward, and you don't have the pressure of being relegated.
Yeah.
And you're at this point in the season, and there are still valuable games left. But what is the value? The value is not in the results. The value is in the minutes available to players for whom you need answers about, and or players who would benefit from getting minutes to further aid their development, right? So to me, it's about answering questions. And I look at you make a great point. Like, because if it's me, again, not a reflection on Beto, but I would roll out Schmidt for a start, maybe 2 or 3 starts in a row, and just see how he does. Like, what is the worst that can happen? I always hear people say, well, if he plays badly, it could shred his confidence. I'm like, well, then he's not, like if a player is going to allow 1 or 2 bad games as a young player to ruin their career, then they were never going to be great to begin with, as far as I'm concerned. I just want to, again, I want to see him play a little bit. And again, it does not preclude you from sending him out on loan in the summer, if you think that makes sense. Like, I think Harrison Armstrong is going to benefit from that loan move right now. And I'm still, by the way, I'm getting irrationally excited about his potential as a player. But that's my thing about Schmidt is I would like to see him maybe get some minutes that are more than just the last 10 minutes of a game. I'd like to see, what does this look like for 60 minutes?
I think at the weekend I was surprised that he was on the bench, because I'd not heard that he was going to be fit. So it was a nice surprise to see him. Nice surprise to see him to come on. So hopefully Moyes will use this time, because that's a really good point there. You very rarely get these windows where it actually doesn't matter. It just made me think of 03-04. So we finished that season. We finished 17th, I think, didn't we? We got beat 5-1 by Man City last day of the season. This was just before you got involved, I think, Rob.
Okay.
Season before. But of our last, say, 10 games, I think we lost our last 4 on the spin. We drew 2 before that, and we had 1 win in 5 before then. So in our last 10 games, we won 1, lost 5, and drew 4, something like that. It was awful, an absolutely dreadful run. But at no point were we in relegation trouble.
Yeah.
So even though we finished 17th, it was Man City, Everton on the last season. They finished 16th. It was like the wooden spoon game.
Yeah.
Who was worst out of the non-relegated teams? And it was Everton. Next season, we go and finish 4th. But this season now very much feels like that we are down the bottom. We're probably we could well finish 16th, 17th, but it doesn't matter.
Who cares?
Because, it really doesn't matter. It would be nice to take momentum into the new season. That's always good. But I would sooner see the manager try out some new players that we've not maybe seen, try players in new positions, maybe try out some new stuff, because it doesn't really matter. Obviously, we don't want to get leathered, because, I think the good thing going into this summer is, although there are question marks around defenders, we are generally building on a solid defensive unit. So we can look further up the pitch, although the fullbacks are an issue. Potentially, centre-backs and goalkeeper, they're all fine. It's players more attacking that we're going to look at. But I think I would like to see that. I'd like to see us try some new things, try Timothy ahead of Beto, because we've seen what he can do. And like you say, he was as key as David Moyes in that run of games that have kept us up, essentially. So, but it's just, there can't be any sentiment in this. There's got to be an eye on. We know what Beto can do. Let's see what Chimiti can do. Even let's see what Brogy can do. Although I think he's definitely one of those players who could just be perennially injured.
He could be, but look, we made the decision with Broja not to push the, pull the emergency lever and, panic buy and like, well, he can get healthy again before the end of the season. And now we've got 3 healthy strikers, and that's fine. And so I kind of like, I'm glad he came on. Like, bring them both on. I'm glad to see him on. I don't know. I don't have a fully formed opinion of Armando Broja yet. I don't really even have a fully formed opinion of Shermity, even though I suspect that I like him. That's the whole point. The only way you can know is by gathering data, gathering information, and the only way to do that is not to talk about it, not to pontificate about what it could look like, or what is the advanced metric site look like in terms of what his colored pinwheel might look like if these things were to happen over the course of 90 minutes. Like, at a certain point, you just want to play him and see how it goes. Yeah. Okay, second player I want to talk about is our man Jake O'Brien, who seems to be becoming an even more regular feature of our discussions of Everton. Les, I suspect I might be falling in love with Jake O'Brien. There's a part of me that loves a gigantic defender who is class. I think part of why I like Jake O'Brien, other than his play and what is becoming to me more obvious with every minute I watch him play, is his immense kind of natural ability that comes in that frame, and the surprisingly good confidence on the ball, and the fact that he never seems to be freaked out by anything. That this is not watching certain center halves who have that panic moment look on their face. It's not that he'll never make a mistake. It's that he seems to be able to just comport himself in a way where he does not let the pressure get to him. But we've seen all this at the fullback position. By the way, you will never see a bigger fullback ever again, I'm pretty convinced, than Jake O'Brien. But the fact that he has come in and taken this opportunity at a position that's not even his normal position, I can't help but think about what this could look like in a center half pairing with Jared Branthwaite. And I am so glad that I also, by the way, love players who are fueled by, at least to a certain degree, by pettiness. You will never convince me that a big part of, we talk about that concept of a chip on your shoulder all the time. The chip on Jake O'Brien's shoulder to just essentially, dunk on Sean Dyche every time he steps on the pitch is one of my favorite parts of Jake O'Brien, because you can read between the lines in the comments that he has, made about, the manager and how they're playing, and, getting to play is really nice. And, I just needed a chance and all those sorts of things. But that guy looks like the real deal. And Les, my question to you, I just want your general impressions of Jake O'Brien, but I do want to do a little future casting in terms of what does next season look like in terms of our starting center half pairing. I think you would not be surprised to hear that, based on not only my opinion of Jake O'Brien, but frankly, the relative step back that James Tarkowski, I think, on the whole, has taken this season. Hadn't been horrible, but he's been bad many times, and not up to his usual standard. But and I say that with the caveat that James Tarkowski has, almost to a fault, kept himself available. But my God, that's a lot that has been worn off of those tires over the years, if you know what I mean. He's just played every minute for a decade, and eventually. Yeah. So my question is this, and this is where I'm going to put you on the spot. I am cool with James Tarkowski, who is still under contract next season, being back at the club and being part of the 3-man rotation there and being an option. But I worry, and this is my worry about managers like Moyes, or managers who can't always let go of that. Oh, I got to have this old guy that I know and trust in the squad. Like, if James Tarkowski is still at Everton next season, will Jake O'Brien even be permitted to play center half in a starting role? That's my concern, and I'm wondering what you think.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I haven't seen. I mean, I saw Jake O'Brien at Preston in pre-season. Went to that game and he looked good. He scored a goal, so he's definitely got the potential, as we've seen, to be a goal scorer and centre back.
Yeah.
I think the best compliment you can pay him now is he doesn't look like a fullback, a centre back playing fullback.
Yeah,
he's taken that position as his own now, and he just looks like a really big fullback. One thing about him, though, that I noticed in the summer, he is very, very right-footed. Mm-hmm. So if he played with Tarkowski in a centre-back pairing, it would be quite imbalanced.
Right.
Because I don't think either of them are comfortable on the left side of a pairing. That's the thing. That's the great thing about Jarrad Branthwaite, and the thing that's so unique. He's comfortable on the ball and he's left-footed. And this is why if he does go in the summer, the club can't be held to ransom by anyone saying, we think he's worth 50 million. That type of player is a rare thing.
Right.
So, if the club do sell him, I hope they don't, but if they do, they need to get as much money as possible because he's worth it. He's going to be an elite player with very sort of unusual attributes. You really do want a left-footed centre-back and a right-footed centre-back. It's not like it's harder to play inverse. Like full-backs, you can kind of get away with it. Wingers, you can do it. Centre-backs, it's not perfect. So I think if he's to play with Tarkowski, it will be a very imbalanced pairing and it would take a while to get right.
I don't want that.
Playing O'Brien and Branthwaite together, like you say, it's just not the done thing because they're two young centre-backs and you don't play two players in the early 20s at centre-back because it just isn't done. But I don't see any reason why they can't complement each other. It's not like...
But Les, that thing you're saying it sounds very similar to, so what's the reason? Well, because that's the way it's always been done. And that's not a compelling reason for me to do it because to me, this is as much about the development of O'Brien and what I believe is his upside talent-wise, but it's also equally, if not more, about getting the most out of Jarrad Branthwaite. Because to me, I don't think like the value of having an older, experienced player that should only mean something if that older, experienced player can still play at a consistently high level. And I'm not convinced that Tarkowski. I think Tarkowski is at his can play in a pinch and be valuable depth and can be versatility guy, not starting 38 Premier League games in half. Anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I think he should become sort of latter-day Jagielka, who comes into the team when we need him. But it's like, I mean, I don't agree with this, by the way, that you just don't play young players. But like you say, there's things in football that are just kind of unwritten rules that every manager seems to adhere to. And I think playing two early 20-year-old centre-backs will be one of them. But it doesn't fly with me because I don't think Jarrad Branthwaite is at the position now where he needs James Tarkowski next to him. No. He doesn't need that old head next to him. Maybe
I want Jarrad Branthwaite to be the leader of that center half pairing. That's what I want.
And that could be a really unique and exciting pairing. And I would love to see that. But as you say, if we do keep Branthwaite and we do keep Tarkowski, then it does raise a question mark about where he comes in. He should come in for me straight away, but it's just that thing with managers. They seem to play it safe, like you said, with things like that. Personally, I spoke to Dave about this actually on Blue Monday a couple of weeks back. I prefer to have 4 centre-backs at the club.
Oh, sure. So, of course.
Because if you get one injury, then you're sort of down. And
yeah. I'm not saying there can only be 3. I'm just talking about.
Yeah, I mean, but then you do have the headache of who gets game time and when. Because there's always going to be one that's frozen out, which this season, as we saw, was Jake O'Brien.
Yeah.
Weirdly.
And now lately it's been more Michael Keane, who is not.
Well, as it should have been, really. Yeah. One other thing on Jake O'Brien, I mean, aside from his footballing ability as well, it should never sort of be forgotten that he's gone about this in exactly the right way. Because he had so much cause to kick off on Sean Dyche while Sean Dyche was still at the club. Because he was never getting in that team. As soon as Michael Keane was getting in ahead of him, there was no way he was getting in that side. But he never, ever kicked off about it. He never went to the press. There was none of that. He's come in. He's done his job.
He almost left, though. That was the only thing, is he almost could have left. I mean, he could have left.
Yeah, and, I think I think most of us probably expected him to in January, and if Moyes hadn't come in, there's a good chance he would have done. But
where would we be right now without Jake O'Brien? Like, think about that.
Because it's looking less and less likely that Nathan Patterson's going to take that right back spot. It's a succession of managers now. The annoying thing is as well, it never fails to just blow my mind. Is we could have had Livramento for $5 million.
I know.
And Benitez was like, no.
I think about that a lot. I do. But look, and this is a kind of a perfect segue into the players that are going to be leaving. And maybe I think I just will say my final thing on Jake O'Brien is this. And really maybe this is a broader point, Les, about how we talk about age in this sport, right? I think that this sport is very weird about age.
Yeah.
And it's weird in that the number becomes something people become obsessed with, and it only seems to get applied to certain positions. You don't seem to mind having young forward players, but man, the further you move back on that pitch, it's like, oh, we can't have someone too young in the midfield. Oh, a defender under the age of 25. What is this? Sounds insane. Who would do this outside of the Netherlands? Like, who would come up with this? Like my thing is this. The better way to look at players in terms of readiness or preparedness in these situations, and like, let's take Jared Branthwaite for example, right? Jared Branthwaite is, how old is he now? 23. Okay. Yeah. He's young. My God, he's half my age, Les. God, 23. If I could be 23 again, I'd tear it up. But he's 23. But what's more important to me going into next season is that he will have not one, but 2 full Premier League seasons of experience, 3 full seasons of first team experience, if you're counting his time, was it PSV? Sorry, I was about to say Ajax. So for me, I don't care how old he is at this point. I care about, he has experience and he is performing at a certain level.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm not going to do is then make a decision about the guy who plays next to him based on Jared Branthwaite's age, which does not matter at that point. At that point, Jared Branthwaite is the high-level, highly experienced player who is, let's be real, he is one of the 3 cornerstone players in this squad. I am hopeful that he's signed to a new contract and we can keep him for at least one more season, right? Mm-hmm. But to me, I want to judge Jake O'Brien based on what I've seen, and I want him to at least have a chance to go into summer training and compete for that job. It's less about Tarkowski so much as it is about, we've spent significant money to bring Jake O'Brien in, but not as a fullback, as a center half.
Yeah.
And then the question then becomes, what is the upside to playing a version of James Tarkowski in 25-26 when we have just seen this version of James Tarkowski at this age in season 24-25? I'm like, what is the evidence that he's going to suddenly get better? Like, he is on the downside of his career now. That happens. He's had a prolific, long Premier League career. He has served us well. I will thank him. And frankly, I would love to have him around as a mentor, as a guy who can still talk to these younger players, whatever. Yeah. But in terms of in this increasingly pace-driven, highly athletic Premier League that is only going to continue to get stronger, especially with the clubs that we have to compete against, I want my biggest gigantic grok center halves out there who, by the way, Branthwaite and O'Brien, what do they also have in common? They're men of size, but they also both have really good pace for men of their size. Yeah. And they both can pass the ball. I want those guys as my starting center halves, and I need to hear more of an argument than, well, He's kind of young. Is like, to me, that does not hold water. Now, granted, he has to go out and earn the job and show he can do it. But I have no reason to believe Jake O'Brien can't do it based on the available evidence we've seen so far. And that's my.
Yeah, I agree as well. And just one thing quickly on this is you got to think that Moyes has been in this position before, where with Joseph Yobo and Julian Lescott and Phil Jagielka. So he had 3 high level centre backs there, and he worked Julian Lescott into that team from fullback. I don't think that's where the similarities end with Jake O'Brien. So I think, Moyes has got experience of doing this. And I think if there's anyone who can do it, he can make that work. And I think you're right, though. I think, Tarkowski, the big disappointment with him this season has been when the team needed him to keep a clear head and act as a leader, he lost his head and has cost us at times. Yeah. So, you can't see him getting any better. But I think Moyes is a good manager to make this transition with those players.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I'd like to believe that ultimately that Jake O'Brien, with this experience down the stretch and the way that he has stepped in and stepped up for Moyes, is going to earn him a lot of credibility moving forward. And so, in terms of that trust that you ultimately have to build with someone like David Moyes. So we'll see. Okay, really quick game here. And this is just a thought exercise more than anything, Les, but we, as everyone knows, Everton have a ton of player decisions to make. Lots of out-of-contract players, and of course, players that are currently on loan that we've got to make decisions about keeping. I think you're going to hear. You've already heard a lot. I feel like on podcasts, like, who do we definitely want to keep? There's been lots of conversations, as we alluded to, about. Do we extend Idrissa Gueye to a new deal? Do we, the club has made the decision not to pick up Doucouré's additional year. Do they re-sign him on more club-friendly terms? Whatever. I want to kind of take the opposite approach here, which I think will be a little more fun for me. Les, you and I have talked a lot about the excitement of next season being a real opportunity for this fan base to really turn the page on Everton and to move in a new stadium and to just, look forward finally, in a way that we haven't been able to before. For me, I don't think that that's totally possible without being willing to finally shed some of the players that we've, either we've held on too long and or they have begun to really age out in a way that it just doesn't make sense. Now, just to save myself a lot of hassle, because I refuse to get into slings and arrows about Seamus Coleman, I want to put Seamus Coleman off in his own category. And the reason for that is this: Seamus Coleman is an asset to the club in a manner that far exceeds anything he does on the pitch at this stage of his career. I mean, I think he's only made a handful of appearances this season. He's injured all the time. I'd be shocked if he doesn't take the golden balloon, if you will, of retirement and take on a coaching position at Everton or some other kind of ambassador, whatever. He's going to coach, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to include Coleman in this conversation. But you have a list in front of you. I've got one in front of me of all of the players who can potentially be gone after this summer. And we're going to take a turn. We're going to do 3 each. And it's almost like a draft where you get to pick. I get to pick the player I am most ready to see the back of, and then you pick someone, and then we'll just go. So we got to come up with 6 here.
Yeah, I
will start because this is my game, and I want to kind of show how it's done. But look, I almost feel like I'm insulting the intelligence of the audience with this pick because you already know. I think you all know who it's going to be. Goodbye, Michael Keane. Goodbye forever, Michael Keane. I hope that you sign up to play with whatever, pit of hell Sean Dyche team is kicking around the pyramid next season. I don't know. Look, here's the thing with Michael Keane. I am ready. Michael Keane, to me, fairly or unfairly, Les, has become the poster boy for all the things that drove me insane about Everton over the years. And I'm not even saying it's fair. I admit that this is a lot to put on one guy, but in terms of making a mistake at the worst possible moment, in terms of of being a guy who would score a great goal and then give it up just as soon as he did on the other end, or vice versa, to being someone who for the most part, outside of maybe his first season here, was pretty bad, and yet we gave him another new contract, which to me was just the epitome of the Mashiri era, was giving new contracts to players who really did not need to be given new money and new terms. And you end up getting stuck with these guys for way too long. See Chink Tosin, see Mason Holgate.
Mason Holgate's back.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I don't want to get into that. He's I don't even know what that's about. It's like, I'd like to think he's just filling out HR paperwork. But bringing in players that were signed at the wrong stage of their career or extended terms. Again, Chink Tosin was getting the second contract, but we did a panic buy of him and Theo Walcott, and it was not good. It was just the epitome of all the things, right? But for me, the main thing about Michael Keane is just that I was so annoyed at his ability to stay fit, because that was the most Everton thing there was, is that it was all of our underperforming players who would stay fit. And it was always our players for whom, when we had them out there and they were awesome, they elevated our play, and yet they couldn't stay fit. See Yerry Mina, see, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, a bunch of those types of guys. Right. So look, I don't want to clown on Michael Keane anymore. In fact, I think the reason he's my number one pick here, Les, is because I just don't want to talk about Michael Keane anymore. We finally have graduated to having a set, and I agree, we need a fourth center half. We to me, that can be a developmental player, that can be a young player. Like, you can sign a guy who just needs another chance, whatever. I'm just glad we're not in a position where there's going to be a manager who has some weird affection for Michael Keane and who is going to play him despite all the available evidence. I am ready for players who are emotionally even keel and consistent. Michael Keane, it's been real. Goodbye. Happy trails. Via con Dios, brother. Good seeing you. That's mine.
Right.
Les, your turn, buddy. Already thoughts on Michael Elizabeth Keane.
I can't look any further than the tricky right winger, Jack Harrison.
Oh, Jack Harrison. Okay, I'm with you on this, but I did not expect to hear Jack Harrison.
Yeah,
there's a lot of weird sentiment out there, Les. He tries so hard, he works hard. We should give him a contract, because I'm with you. But you tell me what you think about Jack Harrison.
Aside from the fact that no one that well groomed should be a professional athlete, I just don't really know what he does. He tries. He never hides. He doesn't shirk. He does all that good stuff.
He's Aaron Lennon.
He's just not very good. He's not even as good as Aaron Lennon.
He's not as good. That's the thing. He's not even as good as Aaron Lennon.
He's just not very good at football, it seems. Yeah. He's got one of the best first touches I have ever seen on any footballer in the world. Oh. It's just the second, third, fourth, and fifth are dreadful. Yeah. So I just don't even loan him back. Don't get him back on loan. Yeah. Just say, do you know what? Thanks. You've been you've been a part of some bad Everton teams. You've been a bad player in those teams. You've tried hard, but no. I think he's got to go back to the Championship. I don't even think he'll go back to Leeds if they come up. I think he's just not very good, is he?
I think he's got MLS written all over him, frankly.
That's perfect. Yeah.
He spent a lot of time. I mean, he went to university in America. I mean, you can tell by that kind of middle ground accent of his that I was shocked to find out he was English at one point, but
yeah.
No, here's my thing. I don't hate Jack Harrison. And in fact, I would even say that here and there, he has come in at some crucial times, especially after Njai went down, and we literally had no other recourse but Jack Harrison. And Jack Harrison is the type of player that I would say I am open to the idea of, if you just need to make the numbers and have a little squad depth, okay. But I think he is the exact type of player that we see that if you need him in a spot here or there, you can get something decent out of him. But the more minutes you have to give him and the more exposure he has, all his flaws just become more and more apparent. The decision making, the shot selection at times, it's just, even when he finally scored a goal, it almost felt a little accidental.
It was 2 deflections, wasn't it?
Huh?
It was 2 deflections. Although his goal at Bournemouth was incredible against Bournemouth last season when we beat them 3-0. Don't know if he meant it, but it was incredible.
Yeah. And look, everyone has, an incredible goal. But look, I think of it the same way as like when Idrissa Gueye shoots. 95 times out of 100, that thing is sailing into, the second tier of the stadium, right? And every time he shoots, I just think, why not just pass that, whatever? But 1 out of those 100 times, it's going to be a worldie or something. You're like, wow, that's amazing. But he has all those other strengths. But Jack Harrison is a forward player, a wing player. He is now approaching 30 as well. I'm with you on that. I just think that I don't hate Jack Harrison, but I do think that we can do better. I'd rather see a younger option in that position. And again, some of this with McNeil eventually back, and I'll be interested to see how McNeil fits into Moyes. Moyes' I don't want to call system, but the setup. But you got McNeil, you'll have Njai, and then obviously we still need to go shopping, clearly. The forward positions all over the place. So good pick. Okay. My next pick, Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Gotta go.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Sometimes things run their course. And the argument that, well, he just, if he could just stay healthy, if this, if that. Look, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, I want to tell you, that goal he scored against Spurs was one of the, when I was over, in Moyes' second game, was the best goal I've seen him score in person for sure. And I thought, man, that was cool, because he like kind of deked the guy out hockey style, hockey style, with moving the ball from one foot to the other. It was great.
Yeah.
It was a very un-Dominic Calvert-Lewin like goal. And look, Dominic Calvert-Lewin during his heyday under Carlo in particular was a guy that you were like, hey, this could be your 15 to 20 goal scorer, every season. But here's the deal, guys. He can't stay fit. And I think that sometimes a player just stays at a club for years and years and years, and it's just time. Right? Like, it wouldn't shock me even to talk about Michael Keane. It wouldn't shock me if Michael Keane went somewhere else and was just kind of fine and maybe even a little better. I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin is a player who has overstayed his welcome. He has been injured a lot. I think him not agreeing that deal with Newcastle last summer was my final straw in a lot of ways, because we could have really used that money. We could have potentially signed a winger with that money. There's a lot of things, but he's entering into that kind of Ross Barkley territory of overstaying and then making weird decisions that hurt the club financially and whatever. But look, at the end of the day, I just think that given his age, I would only ask this one question. Do you really see a scenario where Dominic Calvert-Lewin suddenly takes another step up? I don't. He's not a young player anymore. He's not 22. And it seemed like Calvert-Lewin was perpetually 22, 23 forever.
Yeah.
But now he's in his late 20s. He's got 28. He's got injuries, a lot of physical scars. I'm not saying he can't go somewhere. Like, I think he would be, if you wanted to have Dominic Calvert-Lewin as a second, a backup option, a guy you bring on for the last 25 minutes of the game, whatever. I just don't think everything can afford that luxury. And I think as long as he is at the club, kind of like what we talked about before, he's going to take minutes away from someone else. I'd rather see what they've got. I'd rather see Shermity get those minutes than Calvert-Lewin. I just think it's time. I'm not mad at Dom. I think DCL has scored a lot of big goals for us. Clearly, the Crystal Palace goal will be the goal that he's always remembered for. But at the end of the day, it's just time. And that's really my basic reasoning, is it's just time.
Yeah, he's never going to be prolific now, and until he goes somewhere else next season and rips it up. But anyway,
sure.
I think the thing for me, I think my tipping point was this season when he stayed fit all season, didn't score. scored, and then got injured straight away. It was like, well, this is never going to work, is it? You can't. That's just a ridiculous thing to do. How can you stay fit for that long and not score? And then as soon as you do get a goal, you get injured again. It's like, nah. Yeah, I agree. Gone.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just time. All right. Next up for you, Les.
Hey. Okay. This is contradicting something I've said elsewhere, but I'm going to go Abdoulaye Doucouré again.
I was wondering, because I don't know that he was going to fit in my 3, but oh man, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'd rather, again, Les. Can I ask you? Are you kind of okay? Well, tell me your Doucouré reason, and then I got a thought. But go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think we're going to look back on him as a very, very important player for Everton.
Sure, absolutely.
Scored important goals.
Bournemouth goal forever, yes.
Yeah, he's been a very important, and the Brighton goals as well.
Sure. Yes.
That game he's been very important for Everton. But everyone in the stadium is getting tired of him because he just can't do it anymore. Really, he had a little renaissance when Alcaraz came in. But as the games have gone on, he's gradually sort of gone back into he's just not playing very well. He gives the ball away too much. And I don't want to get to a point where everyone dislikes him. I don't want him to become a player where everyone is just angry that he's on the pitch. So I think now, although I have said in like on other things that I can see why the club will keep him, maybe to bring on last 20 minutes, be a bit of an impact player, do a certain job. But I think I'd sooner see him just go and we start again with, someone else.
I have the same fear of, so my deal with Doucouré is this, like, don't give new contracts to guys who clearly are not at their best anymore, because otherwise you're just sort of going in with a hope is a plan sort of methodology or strategy, which is that, well, but I've seen him be good before. That was always with Dyche drove me crazy. Well, Michael Keane was good for me 5 years ago, so I trust my 5-year-old memory. And the thing with Doucouré is that the trait he still possesses that is of value to a team, and I think it's the reason why he persists in the team, is he still has enough pace and pressing ability to do that part of the equation, right? But to your point, every time he gets the ball, I believe he is going to make the wrong decision or make the right decision, and he can't pass it well enough. Or if he is the last guy in on a break or something, I just am convinced he's going to scuff it or kick it anywhere else. And I have seen more in these minimal appearances from Charlie Alcaraz to persuade me that he ought to be playing in Doucouré's position.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd go as far as to say, I think I've seen enough. Like, we don't need to treat every one of these players like, oh my God, this has to be the only people who have a for sure place in the team are the ones that'll be in the Champions League with us. Come on, let's be real. But what I would say is I've seen enough of Charlie Alcaraz at age 22 to say that I'd rather see him getting minutes and starting games with his shot, with his, all the advanced metrics supported as well. Like, I just want to see more of Charlie Alcaraz with those valuable minutes than a Doucouré, who, again, much like the Tarkowski discussion, can have some value as squad depth. Like, I'm willing to accept that there's some value of maybe keeping him for that reason. My worry is that as long as a guy like Doucouré is at the club, will the manager give into the, well, you can't play too many young players? Like, again, I do think there needs to be a mix of age and experience in this side, but I don't believe that Doucouré is the answer there, especially in a team who, let's be real, and we're starting to see it peter out now, right, Les? But what do we have to be better at next season? We've got to be able to score on a more consistent basis than what we have over these last several seasons. We've clearly seen an uptick with Moyes, don't get me wrong, but we're still a very offensively challenged side.
Yeah.
To me, you cannot continue to have a player in that 10 position or whatever you want to call what Doucouré is playing, where he's going to get opportunities and shots and needing to make the right pass at the right time. We cannot continue to compromise our attack by having Doucouré play this kind of heavier role.
Yeah.
So
I agree. So choice number 3.
Choice number 3 gives now this I think this is an easy one. It ought to be. Ashley Young's got to go. Okay.
That's fair.
Ashley Young's just got to go. And look, here's the thing. I will accept to you that given the incredibly low bar of the 23-24 season where he was an absolute embarrassment most of the time, and all of his experience and cool-headedness led to him getting straight red cards and making horrible decisions and being a terrible example for everyone. I'm like, what's the point of this guy if he's not going to like make good decisions? Like, you can forgive guys at that age for having athletic shortcomings because they're not the peak of their powers like they once were. But he drove me insane that season. Now, by that standard, this season he was much better. There was a point where a lot of people were like, these are player of the season, you know? And again, I think Ashley Young is the exact type of player who shines in a Sean Deitch setup where you do absolutely nothing but try to hold on and not allow the other team to score and hope for a scoreless draw, maybe. But I think it's very telling that when Moyes came in, we have seen far, far less of Ashley Young. And I would even argue that he is now at least playing in a more appropriate role at age 39, which ought to be as a utility bench player who can come in a pinch and, be an extra, be a fullback late, be a right wing in a pinch, play a wing position in a pinch, whatever. But look, if Jack Harrison approaching 30 and not scoring and not really contributing much is someone that probably needs to go, I think Ashley Young at age 40 next season. And look, I'm in my 40s. I love this time of my life, and I think Ashley Young will have made plenty of money and can go on and live on a beach for the rest of his life. But I just don't think he needs to be any kind of player that gets minutes for us next season. The fullback position, just generally, like the only reason Mikalenko probably escapes some of these discussions is frankly just because, in comparison to what we've seen on the right side for most of this time of the last few years, at least he's available and he's steady defensively overall. But I think the fullback position in general, Les, to me is what you could completely overhaul it and replace everybody next season. And I would have zero problem with that. Like, if you told me we were bringing in 3 or 4 new fullbacks, I'd be like, great. That, like, sign me up. O'Brien can play right back in a pinch. We know that now. But I'm ready to sign fullbacks and do a complete overhaul and really see what this defense could become.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think his versatility could keep him for another year, and purely because we can't get rid of everyone. Right. I think that could be a thing. But you're right.
Surely there's someone younger who can be versatile.
Well, you'd like to think so, wouldn't you? But yeah, I wouldn't be sorry to see him go.
Yeah.
But
all right. Final pick, Les, before we move on to
my final pick might be quite disappointing and probably quite inconsequential.
Okay.
But I'm gonna go Joe Virginia. I think it's time for him to go. He's 25.
Yeah. He's grown up. It's time for him to go see if he can fly on his own. Yeah.
He needs to forge his own career and not become a player who just like sort of stays as understudy perpetually to Jordan Pickford. We've also got 2 promising young goalkeepers in Billy Crellin and Harry Tyra, who've both been out on loan. Harry Tyra's done well at Chesterfield and I think Blackpool this season. So it'd be good to see those players coming through and give it a pathway to younger players to basically say, look, there is a pathway into this team, even if you're a goalkeeper and even if the goalkeeper you're competing against Jordan Pickford, because he's not going anywhere.
I know. I think Jordan Pickford has gotten to the stage where we just take him for granted completely, because I could argue he's the player of the season every season.
I mean, it's the 2 saves against West Ham. They were incredible, but
I've lost track of how many times he saved our ass. Like someone said earlier this week online, I can't remember where it was, but I think someone, and I can't remember if they said it like this, but I'm paraphrasing, but basically the Bramley Moore is the house that Jordan Pickford built, or that there would be no Bramley Moore without, like, I said this months ago, but I think without his goalkeeping, there's a decent chance we would have been in the championship, not only in the championship, but maybe in League One, given how bad things were for the last, like how little we had the last couple seasons. But no, I hear you. I do think that Virginia is probably going to want an opportunity. Some honorable mentions here. I think Lindstrom is at least an interesting one. Like, I have zero interest in taking up the release clause to sign him permanently.
Yeah.
But if you told me, given his age and given the fact that, yeah, he has struggled to score goals, but unlike Harrison, I think Lindstrom still offers a little more in terms of his passing, in terms of his, his fluidity in the attack. I think he can do a little more.
I wouldn't mind
He was
another
great
season,
against Spurs. If you could bottle up that version of
Yeah.
Lindstrom against Spurs and give me that, I'd sign up for it. But if we also said goodbye to him, it wouldn't be the worst thing either. But
No.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Man, so much hardcore football content, Les. I didn't mean for this to happen during an international break, but it did. Les and Rob's Record Corner. I am very excited about this one. This is turning into a long podcast, and I'll be damned if it is, but it's going to be okay. Everyone will survive. Everyone will digest this however they want. But let's get to the musical portion of things. So, as you guys know, the Greatest Generation Record Corner with Les and Rob, TM trademark, is a core feature now of the Kickabout, especially as long as Les is joining me. And thank you again, Les, for joining me. For those who are maybe new to listening for any reason, we each take an album from, generally speaking, we're not rigid about it, but we take an album from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, first decade of the 2000s, and we do a bit of a cultural exchange here. We do a challenge where each of us listen to each other's album and we bring our thoughts. And Les, I want to start with you because you brought me. Look, I consider if there's something I know about, it's 90s music. I think it's okay to call myself an expert on it. I had a radio show for years. I have a giant record collection full of these albums. These are my teenage years. And in particular, I would say Britpop, which I know is sort of a term that means something and means nothing all at once, kind of like grunge does here. Grunge isn't a real thing, but yet it become a way to package things, whatever. But I like to think I'm pretty familiar with that. You brought me a Scottish band from the late 90s I had never heard of, and was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed it. But your album selection was It Doesn't Matter Anymore by the Supernaturals, which, by the way, has one of the ugliest album covers that I've seen.
Awful.
It's very, very quintessentially 90s. But don't judge a book by its cover. Really enjoyed the album. But Les, tell me why you picked this album. Tell me a little bit about the Supernaturals and what this album was for you at that age in 1997.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm so glad you enjoyed this because I thought I may have picked one that you might not. Because
it's a bit English, Les. It's aggressively English, but I'm a Parkwalk fan, so really I can't complain about that. So it's fine. I'm good.
Yeah, it was very much. It very much is an album of its time. It came at the arse end of Britpop, let's say. It was.
I shouldn't say English, by the way. They're Scottish. I mean,
aggressively
UK, aggressively British, whatever. Yeah.
But yeah, it was one of those albums that came out at the arse end of Britpop, just before Be Here Now, so it hadn't quite imploded, but it was getting there.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to hear that you liked it because I thought maybe this is an album that you need the context of being 20 at the time, as I was then. There's a couple of things. So the first thing, I saw them at the Lomax in Liverpool for the first time, which was a really, really small venue. Next door to a lap dancing bar and next door to a bar called the Masquerade Bar, which was weird. Amazing venue.
Wow, what a night that would be. Go see a show, get a lap dance, maybe rent a costume. That sounds great.
But after that gig, I actually interviewed the band because at the time I was recording a music show for a Channel 1 Liverpool. It was called a cable TV channel, local cable TV channel.
Whoa, Les, you had your own Wayne's World set up. That's badass.
It was incredible. So yeah, I just interviewed them at the end. Just flew into stuff about so I think it was Smile, was it? Got nominated, I think. Smile got nominated for the Ivor Novello Award. How did that feel, lads? They've just come off a gig thinking, what the fuck's this guy going on about? Who's he? So it was a really good interview though. So from then, I was dead invested in them. They were really good live, just a dead good stage presence. Took the piss, just had a laugh. And then the next sort of time I came across them, I was at T in the Park in Scotland. Just pulled up in the car just outside. It was pissing down. The rain was hammering down. I'd just driven up there about 7 hours or something. Could not be bothered at this point. It was like I just want to go and sleep somewhere. And then in the distance, I think I heard Smile getting played, and instantly it was like, my God, the Supernaturals are on, perked up, and just had an amazing weekend.
Yeah.
So they're a band that like they've really got a sort of special place for me. And I just think the album's brilliant. It's just as you say, it's very, very UK Brit
of
pop.
its time.
Yeah, it is. But it's, it's so cynical. Well, to coin a phrase a lyric that they actually use, it's so, even like the title, The Day Before Yesterday's Man, it's just incredible because, Yesterday's Man, that's a has-been. The Day Before Yesterday's Man, my God, that's bad. And it contains one of my favorite lyrics ever, which is, we all make mistakes, and then when you've made enough, you call it experience, which I just think it's just beautiful. So yeah, this album for me.
That was my one of the things that I loved about this album is, so a couple things, like one, you hit on it. I am a big fan of really good lyrical wordplay. Like I appreciate I always appreciate a lead singer of a band, who's usually the lyricist, who really knows a turn of phrase or finds a way to come up with some creative. Like my favorite one was one of my favorite lyrics in there was from track 5, Love Has Passed Away.
Oh yeah,
I loved it. Love has passed away, but I visit its grave every day. I loved that. I thought that is so clever and but also deep and insightful and sad in a weird way too. But the other thing, like, this album came out in 97 and was released on Parlophone. And Parlophone, to me, I automatically go to like, Blur and Radiohead. Like I go to some of those bands of that particular time, but in particular, I felt like one of the things that I noticed that was a real kind of signature sound of that time was their use of like the vocal harmonizing behind the lead singer. Yeah. And I like the way it was done was really cool. I think that in terms of like, it's so weird because there are times where they sound like, with the way the lead singer sounds, that you can hear hints of Oasis in there, but yet it feels nothing really like Oasis. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but there are elements of what sounds a little like Oasis, but yet not nearly. I don't think they take themselves nearly as seriously as Oasis, but they also reminded me, and I told you this when we talked a few days ago, they remind me of this other American band called Fountains of Wayne.
Yes.
Just because of the vocal harmonizing and the lyrical wordplay, and even just frankly the fact that both of, like, this was their debut album, and this one reminds me of Fountains of Wayne's debut album, which I think came out in 96 or 97, so around the same time as well. But I love lyrics that are clever, and yet the music, like, that was the other thing here too, is that this is a very digestible album, like lots of hooks. I was listening to it and I'm like, it sounds like 8 of these 10 songs could be, or I'm sorry, like there's 12 songs. There's like, I feel like 8 of these songs could be singles. Like, I just felt like they would have flown on the radio really, really well back then. But, they to give you a sense of what I mean by like a lyricist who really is on top of their game, like Fountains of Wayne, for instance, who I compared them to as well, is, their lead singer was a guy named Adam Schlesinger, the late great Adam Schlesinger, who recently died. He died of COVID a few years back during that, which sucked. He's still pretty young. But Adam Schlesinger, you will probably know even better as the guy who wrote the song "That Thing You Do" from the Tom Hanks movie "That Thing You Do." Yes, but think about, everyone's heard "That Thing You Do," and it's sort of this just like, you're almost annoyed at how great of a pop hooky song it is, and it gets in your brain. And I felt like on the Supernaturals, I felt like "Smile" had that for me. Like, I just, like, it was just such an went down so easy. My favorite songs were "Smile." I loved "Love Has Passed Away," which I said before. I really enjoyed "Lazy Lover." and Prepare to Land was another one that I really enjoyed as well. But I mean, honestly, the whole album was just, it was fun. It's one of those fun sounding albums, even though the lyrics are at times pretty cynical and at times even a little dark about, especially as it pertains to romance and relationships and stuff. But yet some of the greatest pop bands ever are the kind that could make the miserable sound fun. I mean, hell, the Smiths were, lyrics are incredibly dark and depressing, and yet they had that, you get that Johnny Marr guitar in there and suddenly it jangles and it just works. And there's something about that to the Supernaturals as well.
And funnily enough, you say they don't take themselves too seriously. That's actually the first track on the second album. It's called "You Take Yourself Too Seriously." So there's definitely something in that. But yeah, I do think it's just it's not completely joyous all the way through. Things like "Smile the Day Before Yesterday's Man," they're really up tempo, upbeat pop songs that you can see that they were the first two. They've gone, that's a single, and that's a single, definitely. But yeah, even in the cynicism, and it's like, it's sort of saying it's not too bad to feel like a loser, because everyone feels like a loser sometimes. It's just something you go through. So it is quite uplifting as well. It's just, I loved listening back to it because I've not listened to it all the way through for years. So again, this exercise of doing an album from track one to the last track, it's a good thing, and I'd recommend doing it.
Yeah, I went on to my most trusted music resource, which is allmusic.com. It's like the biggest library of albums and reviews that you'll ever find. But I was intrigued because it looks like their second album is pretty highly rated as well, and I want to go in and start checking out the discography a little bit more. I don't think they're still together. I think they broke up and got back together for a bit. Are they?
I went to the comeback gig in Liverpool, and there was about 5 people there. It was quite tragic.
Oh, that's so sad.
They had a keyboard player who wore a lab coat, and it kind of become a little bit comedy vehicle. So it was quite sad to see.
It's hard to do a comeback, man. A Tune a Day is their sophomore album. I'm still going to check that out. But I'm telling you, some of those bands, like, you go back and you listen to these albums and you're like, God, no matter what you think about like where they are today, or like, oh man, they flamed out soon after that. I think that the opportunity or the magic is in them catching that lightning in a bottle at that moment of that album. And I think that was really, really good. All right, shall we move on to our second selection? And by the way, I don't know. I wish I had a copy of that Supernaturals album so I could show you the album cover with the monkey, the chimpanzee on it. That is ugly as sin. But there's a weird bit where I felt like a lot of bands would just put a random animal on the cover of an album in the 90s.
Yeah,
that was the thing. I don't know why, but all right. The next selection was mine. Speaking, talk about a band who, basically made they have more albums than this, but they made really kind of 3 signature albums. This one is my favorite of theirs. And after this, they're pretty much done for the most part. But I chose Celebrity Skin by Hole. Okay. Now, I, of course, as Les knows, I've been really trying through, Alice in Chains and some other things to kind of slowly introduce you to some of, the best of that kind of slightly harder rock from the 90s. I know you're not like a big rock guy, but Celebrity Skin for Hole was really their big grand opus statement of like, could we take our punk aggression and yet still make a beautiful kind of pop album, that really works, that had radio friendly hits.
Yeah.
For those of you who, who've maybe been living in a hole, Celebrity Skin had Malibu, the title track on it. Those were both big radio hit singles. The best song on there for me, my personal favorite, is Boys on the Radio.
Yeah,
is kind of a combination of like, and I think it's important to remember the context of this time as well, because, Courtney Love, of course, is the main talking point of any discussion of Hole, but in particular of this album. And this album, so Celebrity Skin by Hole, just to kind of level set here, Celebrity Skin came out in 1998. It was released on Geffen Records. It was DGC Records, which is part of Geffen at the time. They put out a lot of Nirvana stuff. They put out a ton, like Weezer, a bunch of those bands at the time. But the context is important here because the period post Kurt Cobain's suicide was really, for a lot of reasons, as you can imagine, super difficult for Courtney Love. On the one hand, she and her band, the same year that Cobain committed suicide, were also trying to promote Live Through This, which is their other incredible, great album. It's different than Celebrity Skin. It's much more raw, a little more edgy, but it is an incredible album. But at the same year that he commits suicide, they have to go out and promote this album, go on a tour. I think she was probably in most ways not emotionally prepared for that. And this is something that people who lived during that time will remember. And this is a part of the kind of broad misogyny of how we view these things. Think about everyone who's ever made a joke about how it's Yoko Ono's fault that the Beatles broke up. Well, now imagine being told constantly that, while Kurt Cobain was alive, Courtney Love, who was a huge talent in her own right, was basically told that Hole only got good or only got famous because of Kurt Cobain, or that they owed all his success to him. Well, when he died, he was literally the biggest rock icon of my generation who had died early. I mean, it's probably the way people felt in the 60s and 70s when, you had Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin die early. Like, these were crushing deaths for people, and she took the brunt of it. She had to be the one. She even alludes to this in the album of like, I had to be the one that said it was, that had to tell everyone you were gone, and that had to make it okay. And she was in the most, and you look back on it now and it was terrible. People blamed her for Kurt Cobain being dead. There are wild urban legend conspiracies that she murdered him. Like, all that vitriol being focused on her. So in the time leading up to Celebrity Skin being recorded, she had given up doing music. She was doing acting in Hollywood. She was in a couple of movies that were really good. She's actually a really good actor, which is almost annoying. But People versus Larry Flint with Woody Harrelson, if you've ever seen that. One of my personal favorites, Man in the Moon, Jim Carrey starred in that. That was about, oh my God, what is the actor who was on Taxi? What was that?
Andy Kaufman.
Andy Kaufman, yes. It was a biopic about Andy Kaufman. She played his love interest in that. It was great. But she talked in this interview about how she just didn't know that she had anything music-wise left, that she was just not in a place anymore where she felt like she could do it. And funnily enough, it was Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins who she credits for helping to kind of resurrect her out of her funk, her creative funk. She had writer's block. She just didn't feel like she could make music anymore. He was instrumental in this album in terms of helping her. Like, she wrote all the songs, but he helped with a lot of the musical arrangements on there. You can definitely hear some of the ways in which some of the songs really flow that sound a lot like kind of the Adore era or later 90s Smashing Pumpkins stuff. Like, there's some synergy there for sure. But for me, the album is just made up of a bunch of incredibly great songs that incorporate her heartbreak over the loss of her husband, the blame, the basically the whole theme of the album is the toxic nature of kind of Western California celebrity. Literally, the cover of the album is the band in front of a burning palm tree. That was, by the way, not supposed to be the original album cover. They were really just taking a bunch of test photos, and they found that one and they were like, no, this works. And they ended up keeping it, which is also interesting because the drummer, who is the Patty, oh gosh, I want to make sure I get her name right. Is Patty Schemmel, I want to say is her name. But anyway, she ended up she did all of the test tracks, but none of her drums are actually on the album. Like, during the making of the album, they brought in a studio drummer instead because there was all this conflict or whatever. So there was drama and stuff. But the bottom line ultimately being that, you know, like a lot of great albums of that time, there was a ton of like internal strife. There was controversy. There was band and producer butting heads. The drummer being kind of unceremoniously expelled from the band's recording sessions. And yet it was an album full of lots of songs with hooks, lots of songs that were radio friendly, and yet the devastation and the kind of raw pain underneath them that had become sort of a signature for Hole, all of that shit was still definitely there. Les, before I get on to any other particular songs that I loved, I want your thoughts. I thought for you, I thought this was maybe a bit of a bridge too far for you, but I wanted to hear how you liked it and what you thought.
No, so this is an album that I kind of dipped in and out of the same way as I dipped in and out of Garbage a few years before this one came out. I think there's a similar polished but rocky vibe to it. Don't want to make too many comparisons because that'd be too easy, like with Shirley Manson, Courtney Love, two female singers. Blah, blah, blah.
No, but I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
So there's that. So I was aware of it, and you know, I knew songs like Malibu, Celebrity Skin, obviously. So I'd played the album before, but never listened to it in its entirety. I do think this is one of those albums, though, that when you have the context behind it, it goes up a level. So when I was listening back to it, and you know the context, like you've just explained, I just found the end of Reasons to Be Beautiful a hard listen because it's almost like a love letter, I think, to Kurt Cobain. That's how I read the lyrics. And it's really sad. And it's like, it's quite painful to listen to because you know that she's been through that. And it feels like through that whole thing, like you say, you know, people accused her of killing him. There was all sorts of conspiracy theories. But at the end of the day, it was her fault that he died. That was the consensus.
Yeah. And it's terrible. And she had to live with carrying that, you know, all the time.
She chased after fame. It was not real. She just wanted to be a celebrity. And you can kind of see in this, the underlying lyrics, they're all very quite dark. But like you say, there's so many good hooks. And it is just an incredible album. I think my favorite ones, I think Boys on the Radio, I agree, it's amazing. But to me, that feels like she's just doing the Foo Fighters because she's thinking, well, fuck it, I can do the Foo Fighters. So she does them because I think it's a really...
It is kind of a Foo Fighters sounding song with the way, the soaring.
Yeah. I think my three favorites were Celebrity Skin, Malibu, obvious. But yeah, Use Once and Destroy. Apart from Reasons to Be Beautiful, Use Once and Destroy I think is incredible as well.
I was also a fan of Northern Star, which is just kind of her and an acoustic guitar for the most part, and then just a little bit of strings. Like, there was a real thing in the 90s. I'm trying to formulate my theory behind this, Les, and you tell me if I'm on the right track. But like, I feel like a lot of these 90s bands all would they were rock bands, but then they would have like this one song that was sort of this moody detour of like stripped down, sort of minimalist, or sort of something that was heavier. And when I say heavy, I don't mean like heavy rock, but like heavy in terms of the mood and like the seriousness of it.
It would usually be the third single they'd release.
Yeah.
It's released two rocky ones and a ballad.
Yeah. Well, so I'll give you an example. Like Northern Star to me is sort of like if you've ever listened to the Smashing Pumpkins' Siamese Dream, that song Disarm. Disarm you with a smile, cut you like you want me to, like that song, right? Where it's just, and it has like, it's just him and an acoustic guitar, and then it brings in these classical strings, you know, but it's a real, like, it doesn't sound like anything else on the rest of the album. Stone Temple Pilots on their first album, Core, that song Creep, you know, take time with the wounded hand, that song, which is just kind of him and an acoustic guitar and this very kind of like sad and, you know, contemplative thing. Say It Ain't So by Weezer, Glycerine by Bush. Like, have you ever heard that band Bush and 16 So Glycerine? Street Spirit Fade Out by Radiohead by the Bends is a very like, you know, just one guitar, Tom York singing, and it's very like intense. And then they bring in the strings again. The strings are kind of a recurring thing there. You know, or like Nick Cave, you know, used to do all these just hard bangers, and then it was Into My Arms, which is this beautiful, like just kind of sad, lovelorn song. But anyway, songs like that. I love that she had one of those on there. But yeah, like there's definitely a fair amount of it that includes references to Cobain. I think that the talk of him, I think there's elements of it on there of feeling like him being gone, he gets to be beautiful forever, and young and beautiful forever, and she still has to stick around and deal with all these other people and all this stuff. But anyway, I love that album. It's grown on me over the years. It still just plays from start to finish, where I don't want to skip over any song. It rocks, but yet it's got some real depth to it. And again, I love an album that does both, that I can rock out to, but yet has lyrics that are actually trying to say something. And I will say that as someone who is a record, guy who has records, this is definitely one of those albums where, and you mentioned it, Les, like you dipped in and out of this album. It's easy for us, especially now in streaming, to dip in and out. We're just playlists, we hit shuffle or whatever.
Yeah.
But this is one of those albums, I'd say this about Supernaturals too, to really appreciate the lyrics, where press play on track 1, get the lyrics out. Like, this album has the lyrics in the inner sleeve, right? Or, pull them up on like most of the streaming services now, you have the lyrics that you can view on there. But like, when you read the lyrics along with listening to some of these albums, they take on a whole new meaning, and they really, really can hit you in a different way. And so I really, really loved it. I'm glad you liked it. Did you like it more than you thought you would, or what was your consensus?
I did, yeah. And I've never listened to the first 2 albums, as you mentioned. The first one's really quite a tough listen.
Pretty on the Inside is a hard listen. Yeah. It's not my favorite, but Live Through This, awesome.
Yeah,
go listen to it.
I'd never listened back to them, so listen back to them. And as I say, I dipped in and out of this one, similarly like I'd done with Garbage. But yeah, to listen to it through, it was great. Yeah, I think we both gambled this week.
I think that's the value of this exercise, is we got to gamble a little bit. You get me a band with some thick accents that I can barely understand. That's okay. I get you something that's a little rock, a little harder rock, or whatever. But no, I think, and then we delve into like Tribe Called Quest, and we get into other things. That's the whole point of this. But again, guys, I'll get together a playlist with some songs from both of these albums that we talked about, as well as some of the other bands and tracks that we talked about as well. But man, Les, this has been a fantastic way to spend a Thursday with you, my friend. Yeah, it's weird. We're recording on a Thursday. We're going to actually release this on a day when we're not releasing Everton, Byline, and Blue Monday all on the same day. We might actually, have Kickabout will have its own little space nestled here into the international break.
I'm thinking Sunday morning. This
you're going to wait till Sunday morning? Is this still not going to come out till Sunday morning?
We've got mailbag tomorrow.
So okay. Well, okay. Well, I just think Saturday, Sunday, like this should be a weekend listen. Not today, but the weekend. I think this is a good weekend one, so that you can chill out and listen to our lovely voices and comfort you with a talk of Everton optimism and great music. So, but yeah, guys, hey, this has been great. Really enjoyed the time, Les. We've got a bunch of stuff obviously coming up. We got mailbag this weekend. I know it's the international break, guys, but as always, the Blue Room will of course be raw dogging you with content. So you will get plenty of that. And if you haven't listened to Byline this week, it's really good. Continue to jump into that. Blue Monday, anything else from this week, and then mailbag this weekend. Anything else coming up this weekend without football?
Part 2 of The End with Gav Buckland and Roger.
I've got to check. I haven't listened to part 1 yet. I got to go check.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's like Gav, you can just wind him up and let him go and just let him speak. He's he knows everything, and he's sort of it's really interesting. This one looks at loyalty at Everton in relation to Howard Kendall. Really digs into that sort of late 80s, early 90s thing. It's really interesting. Then we finish it by sort of having a look at what the club can do now to not repeat the mistakes of not just machinery but the 90s and everything. So
guys, if you really want to dive in a little bit to the kind of bigger picture history of Everton, you cannot beat Les and Gavin Buckland on a podcast. I'm telling you, it'll be great.
Yeah, that's great.
And by the way, tell Gav that I still want you and me and him to get on a pod. And this is my dream. I want to finally do it, but I want us to do our top 5 UK albums of the 80s.
Oh, what a shout.
Roundtable. And I don't care how long the pod is, but I want you and Gav Buckland on that. And frankly, it'll make me feel young to be the youngest one in a group like
True.
that. So
that'd
be nice.
Let's make it happen.
Well, guys, as always, it's been real. For Les Roberts, I'm Rob Vera. We will see you guys next time for more Kickabout. Take care.